In this episode of the Smart City podcast, I have a really great conversation with Dean Madison. Dean is the founder and CEO of TD Madison and Associates. Dean has a background in broadband, and we first start talking about IoT and the next generation of services. We then talk about how we need to start applying 21st century solutions to our current day problems. Dean is passionate about empowering cities to manage their own complex services and resources. And we also talk about the idea of buying back time and setting up the right foundational infrastructure for a smart city. Dean then shares some of the things he's currently working on, which includes setting up this foundational infrastructure. He also talks about setting up a smart city ecosystem of open data to allow integration. We then talk about some of the emerging trends, particularly the economic and environmental impacts of not implementing smart city practices. We finish on talking about using technology instead of trying to build our way out of congestion. As always, I hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed making it.
It's the Smart City Podcast, whoa, with Smart City experts, here we go. Connecting smart technology, both big and small. Smart cities are making life better for all. Big data, emerging trends, self-driving cars and more. The Smart City Podcast is what you're looking for.
Hello, Dean. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing this afternoon?
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you're passionate about?
You bet. I'm the founder and CEO of TD Madison and Associates. We are a retained executive search firm that's focused on the broadband community as well as the innovation community that is really very much focused on the future. My background, I actually came out of the broadband industry and have been in the executive search industry now for about 30 years.
Yeah, cool. So what kind of sparked your interest in this smart city space?
Wow, that's a great question. You know, there's so many different things that are going on. And probably the first thing that really kind of got my attention toward it, is the broadband industry. If we stop and think about where we're going to be over the next 3 to 8 years, and we look at the number of IoT devices that are going to be in the marketplace, and it's just astronomical, as we all know. But the reality of the IoT devices are really dependent on a very strong broadband network. And that's really what has got our interest as a firm intrigued with the whole smart city concept. Some of our activity has been really focused around future developments in fiber optics, in Wi-Fi, in small cell deployments, in 5G, cybersecurity, and all of these are dovetailing into the IoT generation. We think of IoT today, and most of us, think about IoT in terms of more of the residents. In thinking about smart lights and doorbells and things of that nature. But, there is such a broader concept behind the idea of IoT. And as you start to think about cities and how they can actually benefit from this next generation of services, to me, that's really very exciting. If you think about the challenges with managing cities at this stage, and whether it's here in the U.S. or anywhere on the country, we've got an influx of people moving into the cities. Congestion is just getting really very challenging. Finding parking places, pollution, all these issues are really starting to come front and center. The other real challenge facing a lot of the cities today is where do they get more revenue to build new roads and new waterways, new parking garages. And, as we've seen over the years, even going out and building a new road, it's kind of a 20th century philosophy that really doesn't seem to work. So we really need to start applying the 21st century kind of technology, and it kind of goes back to the IoT. But to do any of that, you have to have an infrastructure. So as you stop and take two steps back, there are really those two components. It's, it's a strong broadband network. And of course, here in the US, we're starting to really see that as becoming kind of too divided. And what I mean by that is, in a lot of cases, the state of Tennessee, the state of Colorado have really started to allow organizations, or I shouldn't say organizations, cities to provide their own broadband networks and compete against the larger incumbents. In this particular case, it could be a Comcast or a Charter or an AT&T or a Verizon. And so that really starts some very interesting debates as we start to move forward, especially as it relates to smart cities. So I think it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, cool. So tell us what a smart city is to you.
That's another good question. To me, a smart city really kind of goes back to the citizens, and how do we, as local municipalities, really provide a better quality of life, for the citizens. And so when I think about smart cities, I think about citizens. I think about their ability to get around, to have access to information, to find parking, and probably the most important is to maximize resources. Corporations, over the last decade has really been focused on technology and driving cost out of its operations. The cities are very challenged in this regard, and it's not due to necessarily, leadership challenges, but the complexity of these organizations. And you think about, water systems that have been in the ground now for decades, and the challenges of when these things, erupt. It's such a disruption to the community because you lose water service, but it's also a disruption in terms of the highway and the street systems. So to be able to get ahead of some of these kind of challenges, I just think make for a much better living scenario for the citizens. I think about commute times, and it's not uncommon in whether you're in Barcelona or whether you're in New York or San Francisco. Commute times have now just become just outrageous. People are commuting hours at times to get in, and to have the ability to control based upon congestion, the traffic lights could save literally 20, 30 minutes on somebody's commute who's already doing an hour plus. So to me, that's kind of the exciting part about this.
Yeah, cool. So tell us why you think that this smart city concept is so important.
Well, again, I think it goes back to managing resources. Again, in the U.S., we've had some economic downturns, not in the last couple of years, but prior to that time. And it really has stretched the resources for states as well as cities. And I would assume this is the same case all over the world. So it's really about managing resources at the same time, really kind of enhancing that, the quality of life for their citizens. The president of Bell Labs, at Nokia, is Marcus Weldon, and Marcus talks a lot about creating time as where we're at in this next era, and I think this to me applies to smart cities. Again, I think about trying to find a parking space, and how I drive around block after block, and it's just I'm waiting for that one spot to open up. To have access to technology that it says, there's a space open 100 feet on the right hand side would just be incredible. So to me, that's part of what I think is the real definition as we go forward. Creating more time for the citizens and to allow those individuals to really live a better life. And it's whether it's something as simple as, a parking lot or, having access to the environment and the sensors in terms of the pollution. Again, we live in some big cities that obviously have a lot of pollution, and we've got to figure out ways to continue to eliminate that. And once again, I see the smart city approach really being able to tackle a lot of these fundamental challenges that we're seeing globally.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea of buying back time. And some of these really simple things.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and we talk about, again, all these great futuristic kind of services that are frankly are available today. But the problem is, there's not an infrastructure yet there to support it. And that's really kind of the fundamental challenge where we're at today. And Marcus talks about, what he refers to as the X network, the future network. And he really talks about, two elements of that. One is the capability of bandwidth, i.e., the capacity, whether it's a wire or a wireless network, but also the ability to eliminate latency. And you think about, some of the requirements going forward, for a smart city, it's going to require both of these as foundations. And we're not quite there yet. I mean, I think we're getting very close. The technology is not in its prime, but we're starting to see trials all over. That once this really starts to move forward, then we'll move into this whole deployment period where it's going to take several years. And frankly, I see this happening more in the metropolitan areas than I'd see in the rural markets, because again, that's where a lot of the challenges exist today.
Yeah, cool. So, how do you think that the US is embracing this smart city concept?
I think it's starting. It's like anything else. It takes time. One of the real challenges is, when you're not necessarily dealing in a greenfield opportunity and you have existing networks in place, whether they're wireless or wireline. So again, there's a lot of the challenges associated with that. And as I alluded to earlier, we're seeing in the U.S. This new discussion around, whether the internet should be a utility or and be, frankly owned as a nonprofit, like water or gas or electrical, or should it still be a private endeavor which is funded by individuals, and that's still a large debate, and I think in some of the cities where there are progressive leaders, they look at what's coming, and their challenge is: do I wait on the incumbents, or do I move forward in building out my own network? And that brings up a whole nother issues whether municipalities should be in the for-profit business.
Yeah, it is an interesting topic and debate, and I'm interested to hear, because I know you've been working on some projects and things. So let's jump into that now. Can you tell us what things and projects you've been working on at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that are very relevant to this. One of the organizations that we support is for the cable TV industry globally, and it's an organization called Cable Labs, and they're focused on innovation and they define innovation over the next 3 to 8 years. And that's where we have spent a lot of time working with scientific individuals globally on these new opportunities, and whether it's, how do we increase the capacity of fiber optics? How do we convert Wi-Fi hotspots into that can upload into an LTE network? Cybersecurity, again, and globally, cybersecurity is becoming such an issue, and there'll never be a network that's not capable of locking people out, right? I mean, that's part of that real challenge. So security becomes a whole another issue. So a lot of those projects that really kind of start talking about where the industry is going to go, over the next 3 to 8 years, and it's very, very fascinating from that perspective. The other real project that we've just wrapped up, I think it's a very fascinating one, is actually working with a municipality in the state of Colorado, where they decided as a forward-thinking leadership that they wanted to be a gig city. And they went to their incumbent providers and they talked to them about, what their goals and desires are. And unfortunately, the incumbents were not in a position to be able to do that for them. And so the city embarked on building an 800-mile fiber optic, fiber to the home network that will have that capability of providing the foundations for a smart city. So it's all this is starting to tie together. Then as you start to look at, again, as the IoT providers, whether they're smart streetlights, and all this starts to really have a platform to run on. So this is all becoming a reality. Unfortunately, just, it takes time, because these are not greenfield opportunities. They're existing challenges in the marketplaces. But at the same time, I think progressive leaders are looking at this and thinking, how do we do better? How do we better manage our resources, and whether those are natural or other? there's just a limitation, and we can only go back to the citizens so much for additional revenue, taxations, and whether that's for license plates or whether it's toll roads or whatever the case may be. Cities have to become more efficient. So these projects all tie back into that, and one of the things that we kind of talked about was the passion. And for us at TD Madison, not only do we have a passion for technology and in improving, as Marcus Weldon said, to create time, but also the people behind that. Technology is just technology. It's the people who bring it together. And we have been very fortunate to be in this circle where we're able to reach across, the pond per se, and find that level of talent globally that can really start to address and solve some of these unique challenges.
Mm. Yeah, cool. Well, that kind of leads into my next question, because I think thinking globally is really important, as well as just thinking, integrating across the different disciplines that we're already kind of working with. So how do you think we can better integrate across the different disciplines, governments, academia, and industry?
Yeah, that to me, that's probably is one of the biggest challenges. Again, you stop and think about the whole ecosystem, and in anybody that you talk to, obviously, you get excited about hearing the various sensor technology that they're developing. You take for an example the parking space. That has to have a sensor. That light pole has to have a sensor, and you could be able to pull certain data from that. But ultimately, that's only a part of the equation. The bigger part of the equation, it becomes really about open data. And then, to me, that really is going to be the biggest challenge and maybe one of the largest impediments going forward, because we're going to have to figure out, licensing agreement that is going to allow, both, whether it's municipalities or whether it's corporations or individual access to data. If we have, again, this quote unquote open data format where people can go in and access us, and again, there's sensitivity, obviously, to privacy issues. But to me, figuring out how to connect that sensor to a broadband network, to me that stuff is being done today, and those problems are being solved today. But the biggest problem is you got to have that that capability to access that data, because the data is really where the answers are. And obviously, as you know, I mean, it's not just the data, it's now being able to analyze that data, which really takes us back into AI and machine learning. Because ultimately, as we talk about capacity and low latency, these are all going to be happening in real time. And there's no way that a human is going to be able to do this. So we're going to have to rely on technology to do it. And it goes back, without the data, without having open data, it's going to be to me, that really is the real challenge in going forward, is how do we manage those license agreements?
Yeah, cool. No, that's an interesting way to think about it, and I think it's so true. Let's talk about emerging trends. Now, I'm really keen to hear about, what do you think that people aren't talking about enough in this space?
Yeah, you know what? That's a great question. I mean, we all get fascinated about, the glitzy, technology and what it's capable of. And I think that's the case. What I don't think people are talking about is really the economic impact of going forward. And I think Jupiter Research came out and estimated by 2021 that cities that are implementing this could save potentially as much as $19 billion in savings. That's what we need to be talking about. It's not just the savings in terms of cash, but it's also the impact on the environment. We all recognize the challenges behind, greenhouse pollution and heating up of the climate. And, we've got to figure out ways how to limit our carbon footprint. And again, that continues to be that debate. But the reality is that no matter what, we need to have a clean living environment, not only for our families and kids, but the next generations behind us. And I think, to me, yes, it is about the technology. Yes, we're very passionate about that. We're very passionate about the people. But when you really get down to it, It's really about, creating a better environment for all of us.
Yeah, cool. It's been so great to speak with you, Dean. I think we see eye to eye on a lot of issues in this smart city space. I really enjoy the buying back of time and using our resources more efficiently, because I think that is definitely part of this. And I think maybe that's one of the other things that we're maybe not talking about enough, that it's, like you said, it's not just about that tech space, but how we can use the things that we already have more efficiently, which hopefully will save us cash, as well as, have a better impact on the environment too.
Well, I mean, we just look at the road systems today, and again, whether you're here or you're in London or anywhere else or Dubai, I mean, we only have so much space, and to go out and again spend the money to putting a new lane on the highway system to accommodate the traffic. I've never seen where that's been done, and literally time it's done, you drive the same stretch of road where there's now the additional lane, and guess what? It's jammed. It's already packed. So we can't just keep building, from 4 lanes to 6 lanes to 8 lanes. It doesn't make any sense. So we've got to figure out a better way to manage, traffic flow. And I think this kind of concept and this technology and where we're at today, we can help do things like that and manage those kind of situations where we're not having to reinvent the wheel in terms of going out and building and rebuilding. And again, that requires such capitalization and again, just, the impact on the environment. We can do it a much smarter way. And again, makes us all, we have a better life. I mean, we're not paying as much in taxes. We have more take-home pay. The quality of the environment is so much better off. The whole concept behind smart cities to me is a very exciting one.
Yeah, cool. I had that same conversation just yesterday about building new roads, and then they filling up, build it and they will come. So I'm glad you brought that up. Well, it's been awesome to chat with you today, and I really just have one last question, which is, how can people connect with you?
The best way to connect to me is through my website, and I'll also provide my email.
Right.
The firm, again, is TD Madison and Associates, and I can be reached at tdmadison.com.
That's awesome. I'll put all the links in the show notes, and people can click away and connect with you. That's awesome. Thanks again for chatting with me.
Thanks again for hosting this, and I appreciate your time.
Cheers. Bye.
It's the Smart City Podcast. Whoa.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart City Podcast. Show notes for this episode and all other episodes can be found at thesmartcitypodcast.com. If you have any questions or comments for me or any of my guests, connect with me via email, zoe@thesmartcitypodcast.com, or via the socials. I'm on Twitter and Facebook @SmartCityPod. As always, I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed making it.
Smart City Podcast is what you're looking for.